Okay, let's dive in. Today we're looking at some really intense source material around NYC mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani, the core mission here. Unpack how critics are linking his political agenda directly to what they're calling a sexual assault crisis in the city.
Yeah, and to get why the sources are so charged, you have to see the crime stats they're putting front and center. They're talking over 1,600 alleged rapes this year alone, plus like 2,000 sexual assaults with penetration and over 4,300 sex crimes total.
Wow.
And they even claim rape rates have spiked, maybe 300% in certain neighborhoods. They're painting a picture of a real public safety emergency.
Okay, so that's the backdrop. And the argument then becomes that Mamdani's own policies could actually make this worse.
Exactly. The sources flat out say his proposals are, and this is their quote, tailor-made to sex offenders.
So what policies specifically are they pointing to?
Well, the first big one is Rikers Island. His proposal to free about half the inmates there. But the critics don't just say release inmates. They claim the plan specifically called for exempting or giving early release to people charged with things like sexual misconduct, forcible touching, second and third degree sexual abuse.
Okay, so that's a very specific accusation about the Rikers plan. What else?
They also hit hard on his idea for social workers, not police, to respond to domestic violence calls. That's another key point of criticism. And then there's his support for what's called restorative justice approaches.
Right, restorative justice. How are the critics framing that? Because it can mean different things.
Well, they're framing it pretty dismissively. The sources suggest Mamdani's version means swapping prison time for basically chat sessions with a therapist and perhaps the victim, or maybe just seeking, reparative work like restitution or mediation instead of incarceration.
Okay, and this is where the sources bring in a specific example, right, to argue against it. They mention Mariam Kaba.
Yeah, exactly. Kaba, who Mamdani apparently quotes, often she's sometimes called the godmother of police defunding. The sources describe a case where Kaba reportedly led a restorative process for a community organizer who had assaulted a sexual assault educator.
And the outcome, according to these sources.
Well, the sources state, citing the victim, that the rapist went on raping. The victim is quoted complaining that even after a long accountability process, the person made the choice to continue raping Black women. So, for the critics, it's Exhibit A of failure.
That's a really stark example they use.
Yeah.
And it seems the critique then expands beyond just these policy points.
Oh, definitely. It gets much broader. The sources connect Mamdani to other controversies, politically and even globally. They bring up his association with a former communications director, Matthew Thomas, who was charged with sexual solicitation of a child. And they point fingers internationally, too. There are claims about his alleged refusal to, quote, interfere during protests in Egypt where women, including the journalist Lara Logan, faced gang rape. Plus, his alleged refusal to condemn Hamas for sexual violence after the October 7th attacks. It's all woven together in the critique.
So it moves from local policy debates to these really big ideological and international accusations.
Right. And the language gets extremely strong. The sources we reviewed call him a socialist candidate, linking him to what they term the Marxist Islamic plague. They warn his policies will foster a misogynistic culture, explicitly saying he'll turn NYC into places like Dearborn or London. Again, just reporting the viewpoint here from the sources.
So wrapping this up, what we're seeing in these materials is an incredibly polarized narrative. It essentially frames Mamdani's reform ideas and political links, not just as policy disagreements, but as direct enablers of violence against women and cultural decay.
Yeah, it's stark, and it really leaves you, the listener, with a tough question, doesn't it? When critics directly tie a political philosophy like restorative justice to enabling serious crime, especially during a perceived crisis, how does a democratic society balance those calls for radical reform with very immediate, very raw public safety fears? That's the tension right at the heart of this. It's a fundamental challenge, really.